Welcome to Backtracking. I know what you're thinking. There shouldn't be a new episode of Backtracking, and there isn't exactly a new episode of Backtracking. What you are about to hear is a Season 1 bonus episode released after Season 2. How is that possible? Let me tell you. Raf and I were invited by the hosts, the lovely hosts, Steve and Gerry, from the Something for Nothing podcast, which is a Rush dedicated fan podcast. They invited us to come on and talk about Season 1 of Backtracking a little bit, share some of the lessons learned, and so we did it, and they were kind enough to let us release that episode on this feed. So please take a listen. Go find their podcast if you haven't already found it. For God's sake, do that now. Few short weeks, Season 3 will be coming. We are deep into the labs, backtracking, researching, doing all of the things that we're supposed to be doing. Hopefully this will tide you over. Thanks for checking it out, and we will see you for Season 3 pretty soon.
It's Something for Nothing, the Rush Fancast. Gerry and Steve with you. Gerry, it's our first official episode of the new year, and you know what just hit me today?
A pie in the face.
After the pie, I realized we're going to see Rush this year.
That's right.
Barring catastrophe, we will see Rush this year.
Yeah, barring catastrophe on all fronts.
On all fronts.
Yeah.
I don't break my leg, something like that.
Yeah, you could break both your legs. You could break my leg.
I might.
You might break my leg, Steve. With a baseball bat, you never know.
But it's very exciting.
It's going to be great. And you know what it also is this year? You reminded me. It's the 40th anniversary of our first Rush show.
That is crazy. 40 years.
40 years ago.
40 years we became rabid Rush fans. And we're going to do a special episode this year to celebrate that. I can't wait.
I know, it's going to be so much fun. A big reunion.
The foursome that went to the first show is still here and ready to talk about it. I'm very excited.
Yeah, it's going to be great.
You can find us on X or Blue Sky. We are at Rush Fancast. Instagram, find us at The Rushcast. Email Gerry, therushcast@gmail.com. The bass intro and outro, that's always Lex. And we'd like to welcome those who are listening on the Backtracking feed today. Our guests today were kind enough to post this episode on their feed. We'll get to them soon. But first, you've got an email for us, I hope.
I do. It's from Matt.
Hey, Matt.
And it's about the episode of Primus Tracks that I was on that I dropped in the feed a couple of weeks ago.
Oh, nice.
He says, my first concert, and therefore my first Rush concert, was 1992. I had never really heard of Primus before, and just remember the stage being completely dark with just a light on this guy with a mask and a stand-up electric bass doing this crazy one-legged stomp thing. I think it was the opening for Here Come the Bastards. It was great. We were like, whoa, they've inverted the bass and guitar. Since then, I've moved to the Bay Area and have heard Primus like a gazillion times. My favorite of which was during the Chocolate Factory tour. I just love that album to this day, but I guess it wasn't well received. I mean, they performed at the Palace of Fine Arts, and during the show, Les said something like, well, this is an all-time low. This is like a junior high auditorium, which is kind of true, and of course the crowd was like, come on, Primus sucks. I think it's hilarious how Les encourages this sort of adversarial banter with the fans. He's like an evil carnival barker. I enjoyed watching Primus's recent YouTube drum audition series. Did you watch any of that, Steve?
I did not. I want to check it out, though.
That's where they chose their new drummer, John Hoffman. I was actually rooting for the Hungarian fellow, who was the runner-up, but I kind of thought he might have been doomed when he said he didn't like Rush. Have you heard about this?
I did not hear about that.
Yeah, the guy's last name is Borley.
Okay.
And he was chatting with Les and called Rush vanilla and cheesy.
What?
So
I would have kicked him out of the room immediately.
I'm glad that Rush didn't do a similar thing for their drummer search, but it certainly would have been interesting to hear some of the candidates. And I got to say, I listened to the Rick Beato interview where Les was complaining that producers suggest they get an actual vocalist. And my reaction was actually, that's kind of not a bad idea sometimes. Whereas I absolutely have never felt that way about Geddy. A lot of people say they dislike Geddy's voice, including my wife, but I have never not enjoyed it, except perhaps for parts of the R40 tour, but that's a different unfortunate issue. And he leaves it at that, so we don't know what the unfortunate issue is.
Well, thanks for the email. That's great. And you were great on that episode of Primus Tracks, Jared. That's a great podcast, and you were terrific.
I appreciate that. They're great guys, and it was fun to do.
Well, as you know, Jerry, we love to highlight podcasts that we enjoy. And today, our guests are host of the podcast Backtracking. Now, in season 1 of this amazing podcast, over 41 episodes, they broke down each of Rush's studio albums. And like us, they are lifelong friends and Rush fanatics. Raf Bagdasarian and Dan Fiden. Welcome to the Rush Fancast.
Hey, guys.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us on.
Really appreciate it. We'd like to start out, guys, by asking you your Rush origin story. Raf, when did you first hear Rush, and how did you become a fan?
I was in the womb, actually. Probably. There's no refuting that, right? No, I remember I got into Rush through my brother. And, I was the youngest of 3 boys. And we were like a year apart, so we were pretty close together. And it was actually my middle brother who ended up being the, quote, jock of the group, who started playing a musical instrument first. But my oldest brother started playing not long after him. And, of course, he started playing Rush songs. And I just heard it from his bedroom. So I can't really pinpoint it down to the first time I actually heard Rush. I do know, though, that because both of my older brothers played guitar, my dad was like, I don't want another guitarist in the family. So my brothers were like, well, you should play the bass, because it's like, I'm like, what's a bass? They said it has 4 strings and it carries the low end. And I think the first song I learned was In the End, right? The Rush song, In the End, was the very first bass part I ever learned. And that was probably the first time I really listened to Rush. And that would have been at age 11, probably.
Dan, how about you?
Well, I became friends with Raf in middle school, and he introduced me to Rush, and we kind of enjoyed a descent into nerddom and kind of band nerddom together, I think. But I have to credit Raf completely with introducing me to the band. I don't really remember what the first stuff I heard from you. I mean, I'm sure. So we grew up in Buffalo, New York. Which is kind of Canada adjacent. Mm-hmm. And I definitely think it's kind of home field for Rush. Maybe not as much as Cleveland, but I think there are some similar dynamics. And I would imagine that kind of Rush fandom over indexes in Buffalo compared to, the average American city. And that was definitely true when we were kids in kind of middle school and high school. So I'm sure that I had heard Rush kind of on the radio, but really as I was just kind of getting into music and starting to play an instrument, I became friends with Raf. He exposed me to, everything that he and his brothers kind of used to play in bands together and listen to. And so I'm guessing it was probably around Signals time, Signals, Show of Hands kind of era when I first got into the band.
And you guys were in bands together growing up, right?
We were in some of the greatest bands in the history of the world together. Yeah. Raf, do you want to enumerate some of our many hits?
Well, the greatest band was Amplified Silence, thrash metal band. That was the best one.
That's a great name, Amplified Silence.
Yeah.
Amplified Silence, yeah. We made our own T-shirts. We had a Raf penned original called Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yeah, welcome to my nightmare, welcome to my fear, welcome to my nightmare, and Satan is here. Those were the lyrics.
We kind of like, when I first started, I started playing drums and kind of like, as soon as I was kind of like good enough to actually play anything, I got into like metal and stuff like that. And Raf was into that too. So we started this metal band. I could, kind of barely play, but that was our first musical collaboration.
It was really the pentagram that attracted us to Rush.
Yeah.
The Starman logo, that was it. We were dabbling in the occult.
You had a copy of the Necromonicon around your house?
So we did Amplified Silence, and then we played in a bunch of bands, the names of which we kind of had this group of maybe, what do you think, Raf, like 7 or 8 people in high school that kind of all played in a bunch of bands together, and we recently were at our reunion, and I was telling the other drummer that was in that group, who was like a much better drummer than I was in high school. His name was Steve. Steve always got like the first call for the band. You know what I mean? And Steve played in like this prog band that Raf played bass for, and then we had a few other friends that were in it. It was called Vital Signs. Surprise! It was not a Rush cover band that I can remember, but you guys played a lot of like Genesis, Yes, Rush, that kind of stuff. And I kind of like got to sit on the sidelines and wish that I could play as well as Steve and someday be in the cool prog band with these guys. And as luck would have it, I got marginally better. Steve continued to get much better, and he got into like bebop and like jazz and stuff.
Dixieland.
Yeah, he kind of stopped playing rock music. It was fortuitous for me, because then I got like called up from the minors to join the next iteration of Vital Signs.
But then we played Jacob's Ladder and Firth of Fifth.
Yeah.
And we like nailed it. And I had the video somewhere, but and I really owe the fact that we nailed it to the keyboardist singer guy, Nathan Gavis, because those are probably the most technically challenging parts to play. I mean, he did the full intro to Firth of Fifth, and it was pretty epic. But
it was. I hope someday we're able to find this video, because it was kind of this, you have to imagine the high school auditorium, right? You're already at a high school battle of the bands, and a band comes out, right? And it's a bunch of dorky guys, and they're setting up an incredible amount of equipment, including like my drums up on a riser, and I've borrowed orchestra bells from like the band director. So I'm like trying to replicate Neil's kit as much as I can with this kind of like borrowed and stolen like weird crap that I was able to grab. And then, you know, our greatest hope probably is, wow, we're going to play in this battle of the bands. We're going to play these songs well, and like girls are going to think we're awesome. And I think we played the songs pretty well, but it was a lot of high school students sitting impatiently while we played through like 3 15-minute songs or something. It was not a crowd pleaser, but it was fun.
And the girls didn't think you were awesome?
No, they did not. No. I think that there is like this kind of consistent truth. My wife was just asking me about the we're going to see Rush in LA. And she was like asking like, do you think there are going to be a lot of like, you know, wives of Rush fans there? And I was like, I don't know, but my experience at Rush concerts is like, you know, it's usually about 1,000 to 1 women to men. I don't know if that's like going to be the case on this reunion tour, but.
Well, that was the running joke, is that when Donica Niles became the drummer, they're like, okay, finally there'll be a woman at a Rush concert. Right. So in that era though, like I had a mullet, I had a broken nose, and I had a Hohner headless bass, because I couldn't afford the Steinberger. Those were like, you know, high-end bass. So like, I was emulating Geddy, which is not who you necessarily want to emulate in high school. I don't know if it was you, Gerry, or Steve, that said in one of your podcasts too that like Geddy sort of like looks better now than he did. Like, and I agree. I think he's grown into the elderly gentleman that he was always meant to be. And I think all the guys, they always got better during age.
Now, how did you guys decide to start the podcast, and why did you start with Rush?
I remember that. Can I give you my side of the story?
Raf, please.
I vividly remember it. I was just recounting this the other day. So I was getting a cup of coffee after dropping my kids off at school. And I remember I got on my car. It was on Westwood Boulevard. I was going to get a cup of coffee, and Dan texted me, Force 10 was it, or Prime Mover?
I think it was Force 10.
He texted me Force 10, and he was like, man, this is such a great song. Like, it was like he just discovered this album. I mean, you've listened to it before. And we started talking about the elements of the song, what we loved about it. And Dan was like, we should do a podcast. And that's where it came from.
Yeah. There wasn't like a lot of, you know, I kind of retired a few years ago, and I kind of got into this rattling around phase. And I was way into radio at my college radio station, and way back in like 2008, 2009, something like that, I dabbled in podcasting with another friend. And I just thought it would be fun to do something mostly as a way to kind of like, to be really honest, a format to spend time with Raf and reconnect a little bit. It seemed like it would be a fun little project to do together that would allow us to spend a little bit of time because, you know, as you get to be, you know, middle-aged dude, sometimes you can kind of drift apart from your friends a little bit. And we've always both really loved talking about music, and with Raf in particular, talking about Rush. And then I don't know that this was a good idea. This probably was a bad idea, but the fundamental idea was we should listen to every song on every studio album in chronological order and not just react to like, do I like this song or do I not, but talk about kind of when we experience those albums in our lives and try to connect them to like our relationship and how we remember experiencing those the first time, and then how we experience them now after 40 years. And then also try and think a little bit about the progression of the band over time. I'm really interested personally in albums as artifacts of kind of what a band is doing at a given moment in time. And I'm kind of even more interested in how bands evolve from album to album over the course of their career. And I think that Rush was a really, obvious choice for us because, number one, we both really like Rush, and that was kind of one of the foundations of our friendship way back when. And two, I think they just have this incredibly interesting trajectory artistically over the course of their career. They have a ton of albums, and they have like very interesting kind of phases and evolutions, and it seemed like that would be kind of fun to talk about after all this time.
Yeah, you know, if you think about Rush, their first album came out in 74.
Yeah.
And between 74 and 84, you've got the first Rush album and Grace Under Pressure. Like their change from, you know, like a blues band almost to, I don't know, whatever Rush is, all the way through Grace Under Pressure is very unusual in the rock world.
Yeah, it's amazing. And one of the things that when we went through and kind of backtracked it, like we use it as a term probably dumbly, but anyway, that's how we started to kind of like refer to it as. When we went back and kind of re-experienced all of these albums in this kind of fairly rigid format of doing it chronologically, one of the things that I think struck both of us off was for the first 10-ish years of their career, they were doing an album a year. And there was huge evolution in those years, right? I mean, they were going from, like you said, this kind of Zepp, very heavily Zepp influenced, you know, party band almost. They moved pretty quickly into a fairly esoteric prog band. And if you just look at the amount of time it took them to do that, it's really just a few years, which is kind of amazing.
Well, John Rotz used to be the guy introducing the songs, and when the drummer's the one introducing the songs, you know a party's about to happen. So that's how you knew they were a party band.
Because drummers love to party, guys.
What makes your podcast so great, I think, is the chemistry you guys have. Like us, you've been friends for 40 years, and I think that makes the conversation that much better. Do you guys feel like the podcast was that much easier to do because you guys know each other so well?
Well, I mean, the thing we didn't really let on to the listeners is that we really don't like each other that much.
This whole podcast was like the last effort to try and heal the rift that developed.
And in our therapist, you know, we have friend therapy, and she suggested that we like role play, like pretend you like each other, like do a podcast together. And I think that's what makes the chemistry work really well. But in all seriousness, we really don't like each other. No, I'm kidding. No. So Dan and I, it's interesting because our lives sort of followed a similar path. Because like Dan lived out here in LA in 2000. I remember I gave him the stage warning, as well as his college friends, who I became friends with as well too. We all lived out on the west side, and he was like, I'm going to move downtown. This was when downtown was like, nothing was there. And we're like, Dan, no one's going to like come to your place, and you're going to be like isolated if you move downtown. And he was like, I'm moving downtown. Lived across the hallway from Emo Phillips, which I thought was hilarious. But it became like the center of like the social universe. Like everyone would go downtown. What was the motorcycle you drove? Ducati?
I had a Ducati back then, yeah.
Like driving down the 10 in the rain and all that. That's crazy. But then, you know, we both married Angelino women, and we've always just sort of stayed in touch. But when, you know, Dan's moved up north to Northern California, got very involved in work. I mean, I guess you could take the story off from that. We sort of fell out of touch, as like a lot, you know, it happens on and off. And I really, I echo Dan's sentiment about how this was a really great opportunity to connect again, to just talk Rush and just reconnect. What we didn't anticipate was how much work it would actually be, as I'm sure you guys get too.
know, right?
You're just like, yeah, let's do a podcast. And we wanted to make sure the production quality was really good. And I mean, the vocals were a little hot.
And we failed at that, by the way.
But it was a labor of love. And I think, our chemistry, it's what it's always been, when we were 12 years old saying, let's call some babes, man.
Yeah.
Let's call some babes. Or walking around aimlessly trying to find like a 6-pack of beer when we were 14 or 15.
Yeah. The podcasts that I tend to like have that feeling like you're listening in on some people who really know each other well and have their own kind of like sense of humor and inside jokes. And when you're listening, it feels like you've kind of been let into that. I think that was kind of like morning drive radio back in the old days when that was like a thing. I think good morning drive radio, at least in my opinion, had a little bit of that as well. It was less about like what crazy thing can they do or where can they shoot the t-shirt cannon. And really, I think the magic was kind of like, oh, these are kind of funny people that are actually really friends. And I feel a little bit like I know them because they're letting me in on their own sense of humor. And so, I don't know. I hope that comes through in the podcast. But
well, I don't know who's answering the questions here or asking the questions, but how did you guys meet? Like how far back do you guys go?
We've been friends since 5th grade. So I've known Gerry since I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So you're back. Yeah.
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 And we went to our first Rush show together in 1986?
And we started the podcast almost exactly the way you guys started the podcast.
yeah.
We were just talking about Rush. And we're like, we could do this on a podcast.
So 86, what tour would that have been?
Power Windows.
Power Windows.
Power Windows.
Yeah.
Okay. Was that your first concert ever?
No, believe it or not, my first concert was Dio and Dokken a couple of years before
awesome.
that. Yeah.
Awesome.
So Dio on the Last in Line tour was my first concert,
Yeah.
but it was life-changing. Gerry, you can talk about that, I'm sure.
Yeah, because I had never really heard Rush before other than maybe on the radio. And I think someone that we went to school with had moving pictures, but I was not into Rush. And then when I saw the show, I've said it before, I've never gone into a show knowing nothing about a band and left 2 hours later needing to know everything about this band.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's a blessing to have been introduced to Rush in that era. Because like for me, that's when I started becoming a fan. Because I remember when Hold Your Fire came out, I was anticipating the release of that album.
So were we, yeah.
I knew it was coming out. I was super excited about it. So it was in between Power Windows and Hold Your Fire that I became a fan of Rush.
Do you think you have a greater appreciation for the synth era because that was your entry point?
That's what I was going to say. If you started enjoying Rush in that era, and then you go back to the earlier stuff, your mind is just blown. You're like, oh my God, right? Whereas if you start in the earlier era, you might be like just a real like rocker and you might be disappointed with the more synthy stuff. But the thing is, and you guys said the same thing on your podcast, the thing about Rush, and this was sort of the greatest takeaway that I got from doing this podcast. First of all, I think I had more of appreciation than anything for Alex Lifeson, like at the end of it.
100% agree. 100% agree.
And when you hear all these different eras, right, the fact that they challenge themselves nearly every album to reinvent themselves, reinvent their sound, right, playing different instruments, and just, hitting the mark every single time, except Vapor Trails until they remixed it. But hitting the mark every single time is truly remarkable. It really is. And I think that's why I never got into a Zeppelin. I've mentioned this on the podcast, and no offense if you guys are Zeppelin fans. I love the total knockoff Zeppelin of early Rush, but I just never got into Zeppelin. I respect and admire Jimmy Page, John Bonham, Robert Plant. I just could never get into them the same way. I just felt they didn't have the same alchemy that Rush had. They played well together.
This is a wild take, guys. This is a wild take.
Do you disagree, Dan?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I definitely disagree. But we talked about this a lot. Listen, I love Zeppelin, and I definitely think that it's just surprising to me that Raf is not as much of a Zepp fan. I don't want to go into the whole thing again, but yeah, I am definitely a Zeppelin fan. But it was interesting for me when we started off on this project, and we really, a little different from you guys, once we kind of decided to do it chronologically, we were locked in. You know what I mean? We knew every week what the next thing was that we were going to cover. And there were definitely moments over the course of the season when we were recording it that I was like, uh-oh, we're about to head into an era that, like, this could be bad. You know, we may not like any of these records, because I don't want to speak too much for Raf, but my feeling about that season is, before it started, I felt really confident that my favorite era for the band was kind of the core prog era. After the early Zepp kind of influence stuff, kind of, you know, Hemispheres, 2112, that kind of era, right? And I expected to really be a little less positive on the synth era, and I was really concerned about the things that kind of happened post Presto, because both Raf and I kind of lost touch with the band around the time of, like, Counterparts, right? And there were a number of albums late in the career that, like, I had only heard once, or I hadn't even heard at all. I had never heard Clockwork Angels when we started the season. And so I was, like, getting really worried, like, man, if these albums are terrible, or we think these albums are terrible, it's going to be a really sad way to end the season. You know what I mean? Like, and no one's going to want to hear us basically just say, like, yeah, this album kind of sucks, and they should have stopped at whatever, Presto or what. And it was so cool to kind of go through these albums, through the synth era, really through Presto, that I think we both knew, like, the back of our hand. And then go into these albums that we hadn't ever heard. I will say that there are some albums in that era that I don't particularly care for, but gosh, the end of the career, I think we both listened to Clockwork Angels, and speaking for myself, I was like, this is an incredible album, and I had never heard it, and I just felt so good that, like, wow, a band, after having been together for 30 or 40 years, can, like, still do it. They can still totally surprise you. They can do something completely different, and they really feel like they're firing on all cylinders in the same way that they were on, you know, in my opinion, Grace Under Pressure or Hemispheres, right?
Yeah, I think The Garden is, like, the perfect song to end Rush's recordings on. And I saw them, I mentioned this in our podcast, I was with my then wife, and we were at the Universal Amphitheater, which is now Harry Potter Land at Universal. They tore it down. But it was one of those rare venues where you could sit in, like, the, you know, in the hockey arena, and at least at Buffalo Memorial Auditorium, there were the upper golds, which was, like, the first, you know, loge level, right? Which was, like, the perfect vantage point to watch a concert. But if you sat right in front of the stage, you were on the other end of the hockey arena. At Universal Amphitheater, you were only maybe like 30, 40 yards away from the stage. So it was like you were right at, like, eye level. It was, like, the perfect vantage point of the stage. And I remember, like, having sort of, like, an out-of-body experience when they were having all the graphics and the video for The Garden. But one of the things that Dan said, around the time that I sort of fell out of connection with Rush, I was in college, and ironically, I was listening to a lot of Canadian radio out of CFNY Toronto. So you had, like, Sloan, Spirit of the West, Sarah McLachlan, you had Bare Naked Ladies, The Tea Party. You know, it was, like, a lot of music that was new coming out of Canada through the Spirit of Radio, CFNY, and that's what I was listening to. And if you recall, what was really big in America at the time was grunge, right? So there was Pearl Jam. In fact, I vividly remember driving down Millersport Highway in your Acura that you got in a car accident once doing a 90-degree turn at, like, 60 miles per hour. Yeah, we've been arrested before. We've been in the back of a police car before.
Raf dared me to take a 90-degree turn as fast as I could on his way over to his house for lunch, and I just completely totaled the car on some guy's lawn.
And the cop is like, he's quiet. He's dropping us back. He just quietly goes, "Can I ask you a question?" What the hell were you thinking? But we can out Jersey in Buffalo, just so you know. I'm sure, like, but I remember we were driving down Millersport Highway North, and he was playing Pearl Jam. He's like, this band's going to be huge. Like, and no one knew of Pearl Jam at the time. Dan was like a real tastemaker. He was like a little bit of a celebrity in Columbus, Ohio, at Denison University with the Little Dan Show, a radio show out of Denison back in the early mid-90s. So
a very little bit of a celebrity. No, I mean, it definitely, I think for both of us, we kind of moved into very disparate musical tastes for a pretty good period of time. It wasn't as though, like, I stopped liking Rush, but I just kind of, I listened to those albums a lot, kind of in early high school, middle school. There was a period of time when I could name every Rush song on every Rush album in chronological order, in like track sequencing order. I was a huge obsessive. And then I just kind of, found other stuff. But again, I think that's pretty natural for people. And for me, that was what was so fun about Backtracking. I hadn't been listening to any of these albums for so long. And when I texted, Raf told that story about me texting him on the way to go surfing one morning. And I just happened to be listening to Rush that morning. It just like hit me. I was like, wow, this band is amazing. And I haven't been listening to them for so long. It would be really fun to just go through the entire catalog in order and just completely immerse myself in it and just kind of see what I think about it now. Again, that was maybe a dumb idea because it really signed us up for, I think, more podcasts than we anticipated. But I'm actually super glad we did it. I had a ton of fun doing the Rush season, and it was cool to rediscover all the music.
He mentioned he was surfing and listening, and I mentioned on our podcast too, there is something about growing up and discovering Rush and listening to them in the winter, in the cold, in the Buffalo winter. It computes, right? And listening to it here in LA or when it's sunny out, it's nice and all, but it's like it just doesn't have the same connection as that, like when I first discovered it. Like to listen to like Caress of Steel like in the winter time and just like it's cold out and it's like a journey you're going on, was just magical.
Now I've got a question for you guys, if you don't mind.
Sure.
One of the things we did in the finale of season 1, and then we ended up doing it in the finale of season 2 for the other band that we covered, we had a very loose format for the show. I mean, it wasn't heavily formatted, but it was pretty straightforward. And at the end of the show, we would each have to pick our favorite. At the end of each album, it was usually 2 episodes per album, but at the end of each album, we'd have to pick our favorite song off the album and then our least favorite song off the album. And then at the end of the season, we built these like tournament brackets and then had to pick which song would be the winner or, in the case of the worst ones, the loser, and go all the way through. And so we did this thing and kind of determined favorite album, least favorite album, or favorite album, favorite song, least favorite song. So I wanted to ask you guys, off the top of your heads, no preparation, or maybe you've already done this, I would like to know each of your favorite Rush albums, favorite Rush song, and least favorite Rush song, which is really the one that kills you.
Gerry, you go first.
Okay. Well, we have talked about this a lot, and we are trying over the years to come up with a comprehensive ranking of every Rush song. We've got a mathematician on our side who's who's crunching the numbers for us.
You have to publish that as a book when you get that compiled.
That seems appropriate.
We're gathering as much data as we can from people who listen. Every once in a while, somebody will listen to the episode that we try to rank every song, and they'll send us their own rankings. My favorite Rush album is Moving Pictures.
Okay.
And my favorite song is Free Will.
Okay.
And my least favorite song is Taishan.
Okay. All right.
I get so many emails being like, Gerry, Taishan isn't that bad. And it's always at the bottom of the list for me.
Okay. All right, Steve.
Like Gerry, my favorite album is Moving Pictures, has to be. Favorite song is Red Barchetta. And least favorite song is Rivendell. What about you guys?
What?
I might have said
strong
that.
disagree on Rivendell. I strongly disagree. Yeah, I think it's a little gem. It's not characteristic of the band, but like I'm telling you, I think
That's the Zeppelin fan in you coming out.
You know what? It totally probably is.
Any Hobbit influenced song.
Do you still have our brackets? Because
I do. Yeah, I've got the brackets. Do you want to know what yours were, Raf?
Well, I know that my favorite album was Permanent Waves, and I think Free Will was Limelight was probably my favorite song.
I will confirm that right now. Raf's favorite song was it was Limelight. It was Limelight. Limelight won out in a head-to-head with Spirit of the Radio.
Which is on Moving Pictures, right?
The real juice here is the worst song. Raf's opinion on the worst song in the catalog was Dog Years.
Was it Dog Years?
Years.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a good choice, though.
in our episode on that album, we really kind of both landed in a pretty negative place about dog ears.
Well, it was supposed to be an objective selection, but Dan was like, "Are you sure? Are you sure? I don't know."
Wait, are you saying I influenced you too much?
You did, yes. It was a biased study.
All right, we've got a couple for you. Some random ones. Okay, we did episodes on all this stuff. Favorite Alex solo off the top of your head, Raf first.
It's Limelight.
Limelight.
That was what I think. That was one of the things that I said. There's a great YouTube video too that I found of Alex Lifeson breaking it down.
Yeah,
and it's just so. I mean, it's not a shredder solo, but it's just so. I'm a storyteller, right? I mean, that's why I moved out to LA, was to work in the industry and to write and all that. And I don't do that anymore. I haven't done that for a long, long time. But they're storytellers, those guys, right? And not just lyrically, but musically too. And that solo is just so haunting and so beautifully crafted. I could listen to it on repeat forever.
Yeah.
You know what? This is going to be a tough one for me. I want to say, I mean, the Limelight solo is great. I'm actually looking at my bracket for like best songs. I think I'm going to go with, maybe I'm just going to go with Limelight. I'm just going to go with Limelight because I'm looking at these songs and like there's something to be said for the fact that I can sing the solo in my head right now, unprompted, right? It's so memorable. So I'll stick with that as well.
Gerry, I know, agrees with you guys in Limelight, right, Gerry?
Yeah, Limelight is the best. It's up there with the greatest solos of all time from any band. If you ask me, it's not just a Rush band.
All right, I'm going to go with Chain Lightning for my solo, the backwards solo.
Oh,
That's a good one. Yes.
But Dan, did we get your favorite album?
You know what? You did not. My favorite album, the final showdown for mine, it was, I think, a little bit surprising maybe, but it was Grace Under Pressure versus Hemispheres, and Hemispheres won out.
Wow.
I just love Hemispheres. I think it's a perfect album. It's a short album, not that many songs on it, but I just don't think there's a single miss at all. I think they're all A+.
All right, favorite Getty bass line, Raf, you first.
It's probably going to be off of Power Windows. It's probably Marathon. Well, it's. I'm trying to think.
Marathon's a great choice.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, no, but that's the one that I'm thinking. That's the one that's going through my head right now. Maybe Territories. I would say Territories.
Yeah, it's another good one.
I mentioned it in our podcast too. The wall bass sound. It's my favorite bass sound in Rush. Right. For me, the master of the Rick was always Chris Squire, right? Which was one of Getty's major influences, right? That's why he got a Rickenbacker. But in the Rush sort of canon of basses that Getty used, the wall to me was the best, punchiest, just the best sound. It was like an extension of Getty's like soul, it felt like.
It's a lot more burpy, right?
It's just very punchy and it's interesting because as a bass player, depending on the instrument you're playing and the sound of it, you're going to adjust how you play. You might play more with your fingers. You might play with a pick. You might play with your thumb. I usually, by default, I play with my thumb on the PV unit I have. But I think Getty as well is adjusting his style based on the basses he's playing. In fact, when he's playing the wall, when you see like the video for like the Big Money, you see him playing a way where his fingers are like really tight, like his hands like almost like contorted. And I totally get what he's doing, and I totally feel what he's doing. And I think that the wall bass, it must have been I've never played a wall bass, or like Dan looked it up when we did that episode. It was like, they're like $50,000. They're very rare.
I was like, yeah, it would be an amazing gift for my friend Raf to buy him one of these basses that he's going out. And then I went on the website. I was like, yeah.
Oh, dude,
I'm
come
not
on.
gonna do that.
Maybe just a picture of one.
Sell a kidney. Come on, you don't need it. But that bass sound, just when you asked that, Steve, like, what's the favorite Getty bass part? I'm like, it's got to be Power Windows, because he was playing the wall on Power Windows. And to me, it's just a magical bass sound. It's just so great.
I am not a bass player, so I'm going to pick a song, and Raf is probably going to, yell at me.
I'll judge you,
But
yeah, of course.
Here is the song I'm going to pick. It's going to be unexpected, deeper cut, Losing It.
Wow.
Will you guys accept that as an answer?
Of course.
Sure.
We'll accept anything.
Well, you guys had Ben Mink on your podcast, didn't you?
We did.
That's insane.
He was incredible.
That's great. That's awesome. I mean, you had Hugh Syme, Terry So Dan wrote our openings, by the way, and he would be like, Terry, that bastard Brown.
No wonder you never had him on.
No, we had this thing. We had this thing where like after our like first episode or two, he's like, we should be like
That son of a bitch, Terry Brown.
we should be abusive to the inner sanctum of Rush. And what did your wife say, Dan, about like we spoke too fast or we spoke too slow?
Oh yeah, she said you guys talk so slow. You gotta like talk faster. And I was like, just turn it on like 2x or whatever. It's not like my wife is listening to a Rush podcast anyway. I mean,
Well, you're still married, so of course she's not listening to that podcast. 'Cause it would be over if she were.
So, Steve, do you remember ours?
Mine's Analog Kid.
I don't remember what mine was. I'm going to say right now, I'm going to say Turn the Page.
Oh, great one.
Yeah.
oh yeah.
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 Why not?
Another Wall era bass. I mean, he
Yeah.
played it on Hold Your Fire too. So
All right, Neil Peart drum part.
All right, well, I'm going to start. There are obviously lots of different options here, but I am going to say Xanadu because I feel like it's kind of like all dimensions of Peart during like the rushiest era of Rush. You know what I mean? And I love that, but it really is kind of like the big sweeping kind of like epic stuff, and then there's also, you know, there's some kind of interesting, somewhat more technical sections to it. I don't know. It's one of my favorite songs, and I just love the unapologetically epic approach to playing the drums on that song that he took. And, you know, obviously he's not the only one. Everyone just kind of decided like, we're going to turn the governor off on this one, and we're going to give him like unadulterated Rush.
Yeah.
All right, Raf.
it's like asking which is your favorite child, and I have 2 kids, and although I do have a favorite, no, I'm kidding. I would have to say the one that pops in my head is, and I have an honorable mention, but the one that pops in my head is Mystic Rhythms. It's just, again, magical. It's not his like most technical drum part, but it's mystic. Yes, and it really is. An honorable mention is Anthem, and the reason why, and I was actually telling my 13-year-old, because she wanted to hear Fly By Night. She asked to hear songs like Fly By Night, and I was telling her like, I was thinking to myself, I was having an internal monologue. But imagine, and I said this too in our podcast on Fly By Night, the album, you know, imagine being a Rush fan and then like buying Fly By Night and putting the needle down on the vinyl and hearing Anthem.
Yeah.
Like it would be mind blowing. It would be a transcendent experience.
Yeah. The leap, I almost picked Circumstances. Circumstances, I think, is an incredible drum part.
It is.
Jerry, what was yours?
I have no idea.
Come up with one now. You can do it.
It has to be one of his gigantic epic fills.
I mean, there are so many.
There's so many. I'm probably something from La Villa, probably.
Oh my God. Well, yeah, La Villa, like, it's a great choice.
Right. I mean, I have no idea what I said on the show, Steve, so somebody will, though.
I was listening to the Camera Eye today, and that one is incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it might be that slow part in La Villa, where he's just, where Alex is just kind of like crying. His guitar solo is crying.
Going back to Alex solos.
Yeah.
I mean, when you guys asked about the Alex solos, when Raf said this, I really kind of, and again, like, I'm just admitting something that was probably very dumb, but because I listened to Rush mostly when I was kind of in middle school and high school, for whatever reason, I mean, because I played drums probably, and because Geddy and Neil are such technical players, and that's what, like, as I was learning how to play drums, that's what I was most interested in trying to figure out how to do, is play really technically. I always just kind of thought of Alex as like the third guy, to be totally honest. I just never, it's not like I ever thought he was like not good or anything, but I just kind of felt like he was the third guy in the band, and really it was kind of about Geddy and Neil. And when we went through and listened to these albums, I really appreciated how I just don't think the band would work without the way that Alex plays guitar.
Yeah.
I mean, he has some of these unbelievable kind of out of nowhere, crazy great solos, but he always seems to play with like the exact amount of taste that's required to like gel all of the songs. And I think, Rafi calling out appreciation for Alex is one of the biggest takeaways. I got to agree. I mean, obviously Neil was an incredible drummer. Obviously Geddy is an incredible bassist, but yeah, the appreciation for Alex was a big one for me.
What about the appreciation for Neil Peart's lyrics? I assume you guys have a much greater appreciation for the lyrics now after going through all the records than you did before.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I always called Rush lyrics, the catalog of lyrics, a secular Bible, right? I mean, like anything you're encountering in life, you can usually find an answer or a kindred spirit or like an analogy or something, some sort of relatable experience in the lyrics of Rush.
I think one of the things that, yeah, we absolutely, we talk about the lyrics a lot in the podcast if you haven't heard it before, but I think one of the things that, again, struck me about the catalog, having gone through the entire catalog, is how difficult it must have been for a band that in the kind of like 70s really threw themselves into the prog rock aesthetic of lyric, right? I mean, they really threw themselves into, they're great lyric. I love that era and I love those kinds of lyrics. But when you're kind of doing a lot of narrative and you're setting things in fictional worlds, and you're not really talking quite so much about this is the way I feel. It's more like we're in a spaceship going into a black hole. You know what I mean? That's like a very different style of writing than what he transitioned to pretty early on in the 80s. And he made that transition in a way that I just felt like was super honest. The lyrics were frequently beautiful, and it didn't seem to me jarring in the way that it would maybe seem jarring if like all of the sudden Tori Amos wrote an album about being a Starfleet commander. You know what I mean? Right? Like you'd be like, wait, what the fuck? But it would seem strange. And somehow listening through the catalog, those transitions just never felt strange to me. Pretty neat.
So guys, this is something you haven't talked about on your podcast. Your thoughts on the 50-something tour. What did you think when you heard the news?
All right. I will probably play the bad guy here a little bit. I'm going to begin by saying that Raf and I are going to see the band together in LA.
In cosplay, most likely.
In cosplay, by the way, guys. We are going to get the
silk robes,
Hemispheres era kimonos, and we're going to wear them to the show, and it's going to be awesome. But I have to say, like, I definitely wanted to hear the band again, and I want to hear Rush again. In some ways, I'm glad they're doing it, but I am concerned a little bit, if I'm being really honest, because I have such a strong emotional connection to the band and to seeing the band when I was younger, and I have such a strong kind of sense of what that experience was. I'm a little cautious. I'm going, and I'm, happily going, and we've spent obviously lots of money to go, right? So like, I'm not that cautious about it, but I will say I was thinking about it, and I guess, I don't know, last week or week before, I happened to listen to the episode that you guys did talking about like the last minute tour emergency episode. And like, yeah, I'm a little worried about the set list. I'm worried about there being an extra keyboard player. A lot of the experience is like, wow, Geddy's playing Taurus pedals and bass, and like, look at him go. You know what I mean? And I'm not sure, is it going to feel like when Guns N' Roses added a keyboard player? You know what I mean? Obviously, Annika Niles is like, I didn't know anything about her beforehand, but I've, checked out lots of videos and everything. She's an incredible drummer, but she's a pretty different style of drummer than Peart. And one of the things that we talked a lot about, I think, on our podcast when we were covering the live albums is how Rush is not an improvisational band. You know what I mean? You would go to see a Rush show and they would kind of deliver pretty much what you heard on the album, including and perhaps especially Neil, right? And I read an interview with him or watched a video about him one time where another drummer was, it might have been like Dave Grohl or something, but they were talking about a conversation that they had had with Neil when he was live and saying like, how do you get people to like air drum every fill? He's like, you got to play it the same every single time. Right. That's the only way they know those parts. You know what I mean? And so I do wonder, like, how is she going to not come across like a Rush cover band drummer, but also deliver what I think people are expecting to a certain extent. So I'm incredibly enthusiastic about it, but I have a little bit of hesitation as well.
What about you, Raf?
I don't have the same fears. I trust Alex. Unlike Dan, I trust Alex and Ged are going to do the right thing.
You son of a bitch.
Neil Peart was a brother to them. And I know whatever they're going to do is going to honor his legacy. And I'm there for it regardless of what they do. To his point, though, on a more technical level, I think Annika Niles is going to have to play the drum parts verbatim, right? Neil Peart didn't he wasn't an improviser. It was basically a score. So it's like, I look at it like you're playing Bach, right? If you're going to play, that's a bad example because of a lot of the flourishes you can improvise on. But if you're going to play Beethoven's Fifth Symphony or Ninth Symphony, you're going to do it as it was written, and you're not going to, diverge from that. You're not going to, and I think that's the way they're going to do it. I didn't really think about the additional keyboards and stuff. I think that's just Geddy just saying look, I don't want to have to deal with that. Just have someone else do it, and I'll continue to play. So I think if there's anything that's out of the norm, it's probably going to be Geddy playing bass over parts where he was normally not playing bass, right? As far as what I think to what we're going to expect, first of all, I think having no expectations is what's going to make it a really great show.
But Raf, how can you go into it with no expectations?
I don't. I'll get back to 1 second. So obviously, if they do YYZ or YYZ, and there's a drum solo, it's going to be her drum solo. But I mean, you've been to Rush shows. People are drumming exactly what Neil Peart does, and you can't fuck with that. That's the holiest of holy, right? So and I'm sure they know that. They can't be that self-unaware. What I'm curious to see is, do they do any covers, right? And then because they did do some covers for the early songs that they did, the Zeppelin songs and Cream songs. And B, and this is where I'm really excited, are they going to do any new originals? Have they been writing? They're not going to tell us in advance. Are they going to be writing, and are they going to play one or two new songs that were original? I think they are, at least one song, and I'm excited to hear that. Now, I was actually talking about this, not Rush specifically, with a friend of mine. I think that bands are, they're corporations. And I think they're going to continue on in perpetuity. I'm not saying this about Rush, but I could totally see the Rolling Stones or some bands continuing on. And the Rolling Stones LLC, 50, 60 years in the future, is the officially sanctioned version of the band by the estate of the Rolling Stones. And I can see them being ongoing interest. So maybe that's where Rush is headed. I don't know.
So are you saying that they're gonna do a Dead and Company style, hand over to the keys to the catalog and the fan base?
The Dead's doing it, yeah. I mean, I'm not saying they're gonna do it, but they could be teeing it up that way.
So wait, Rafi, you're saying that John Mayer is gonna join Rush next? Is that what you're saying?
You heard it here first.
I cannot believe it. That is a hot take.
I mean, he just bought a studio. He bought the old Chaplin Henson studios here in LA, so you never know.
So before we go, guys, let's break some news here. For season 2 of Backtracking, you guys did American Music Club.
Dan did American Music Club. Dan and J. William Hall did that. So Dan,
really? You weren't? I didn't listen. See, I didn't listen to that because I don't know that band.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're in good company not knowing that band, American Music Club, and the American. So somehow we did 52 episodes on American Music Club, which is a band that is very, very different than Rush.
You think?
But yeah, very different. There is a very small Venn diagram overlap of Rush fans and American Music Club.
And I think you got emails from every single one of those people, too.
I think we did. But basically, when we went into season 3, Raf and I had kind of talked a lot about doing another big season together. And we debated, do you want to do Genesis? Do you want to do Iron Maiden? And I was just kind of I can't sign up for another 50 episode season. It's just too long to focus on one band right now. I'm sure we'll do that again in the future, but I need a break and a little more of an ADHD kind of a season. And so what we decided to do is this season we're not going to do an entire catalog. Each of the three of us, Raf, J. William, and me, are selecting 5 albums that we think are awesome, and they're either underrated or overlooked or generally not commercially, they may be popular, but they're not like commercially well loved or critically well loved. And then each week we're going to spin a wheel. Whatever album shows up on the wheel, we will cover in the next episode. And so it's going to be a much more diverse season. We're still winnowing down the albums that are going to be on that magical wheel, but we've got some pretty neat ones on there so far.
Well, and part of the challenge is, and you guys could probably relate to this, is like there's no other band that I feel that close to as Rush, where I could live with that band for that long. And some of the bands that Dan mentioned, Maiden, maybe, but they didn't really progress much. There's not much different from album to album, maybe era to era or like lineup to lineup. And the one that I might be able to do, and even then I'm sort of on the fence, is a band that Dan was like, I'd rather put a hot poker in my eye. And the one that he said, like, I would put a hot poker. For me, I could do Dire Straits, right? But like, I can't do.
Guys, I don't like Dire Straits.
I can't do Steely Dan. So we're like, well, and now we have a third co-host in J. William Hall. So we're like, well, let's do something where we do it all together. And this is the way to do it, because we had albums that were sort of the germ of what do we want to do for the bands. But when we looked at the bands, we're like, I can't speak as, and one of the things that I want to say too, like we never claimed that we were experts on Rush, right? We did it, and you guys seem to have done the same thing. It's a fan's perspective, right? People who are really into this band. We're not claiming to have been in the inner sanctum. We're not claiming to know every little detail. I'm sure there are people that know way more than all of us even combined about Rush, right? Rush savants, if you will. So we just wanted to do it from a fan's perspective, right? And it was a lot to do it for a full season. And Dan knows that 2X because he did AMC. But we felt like, just doing the albums would be a nice little break, but also an interesting new way to sort of approach backtracking.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys, for joining us today on the Rush Fancast. Thanks for keeping the Rush flame burning. We appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Maybe we'll have to come out to LA one day and we can hook up.
Anytime. Absolutely. And I have to say, I'm really honored that you guys reached out to us. You guys are the authoritative podcast on Rush, and you're keeping that alive and going. So thank you for inviting us on to share our thoughts on yours.
Awesome. Thanks so much, guys. Have a great night.
You too.
We'll see you guys.
So, Jer, Raf and Dan did what we could not do.
I can't even imagine what that is, Steve. I'm trying to think of something funny to say, and I'm coming up blank.
Well, they reviewed all of Rush's albums in order, without distractions, got through it, and went out. That's what our plan was.
That was our plan. They took a big, deep bow.
Yeah.
Took a break and started with their second season.
We, as we always do, got distracted by other things. Got off the tangent, and we're still here doing this podcast.
I know. It took us like 3 years to get through all of the albums, didn't it?
Yeah, long time.
It was a long time.
But Raf and Dan had a plan. We did not have a plan.
We did not have a plan. We had the idea of a plan, but we didn't have a plan. Yeah, it was interesting. I listened to that podcast when it came out, Backtracking. I listened to the whole first season. And it is interesting hearing them talk about each album chronologically, because you really get the feel of how the band changed. We were jumping all around at the beginning, going from different parts of Rush's career.
Well, I think the difference with Raf and Dan's podcast is I think you could listen to it if you were not a Rush fan at all.
Right.
Because they gave a lot of background that we didn't. We went in with the assumption that Rush.
That's true. We did.
Which our listeners do.
Right.
But I think you could listen to Dan and Raf's podcast if you are a Rush fan, and you could also listen to it if you have no idea about the band and learn a lot.
That's true. I didn't think about that. That is a good description of it. Yeah.
So it was well planned out.
It was well planned out, yeah. We kind of just jumped in, assuming a general level of knowledge about the band. It's true.
But if you haven't listened to Backtracking, check it out, available wherever you get your podcasts. You can find us on Blue Sky at Rush Fancast. Instagram, find us at The Rushcast. Email Gerry, therushcast@gmail.com. Let them know what you thought of our conversation with Raf and Dan. And thank you to all the listeners of Backtracking who checked out this episode. If you want to hear more of our episodes, we are available wherever you get your podcasts. And Gerry, you always wrap things up with a quote, and I hope you got one.
I do. It's from Mission.
Nice.
I hear their passionate music, read the words that touch my heart. I gaze at their feverish pictures, the secrets that set them apart.
Awesome. Thanks, Gerry. Speak to you in a couple of weeks.
See you later.